Laken Riley, Kate Steinle, and Molly Tibbetts. Three names used to example why we need mass deportations. Too many undocumented migrants here committing violent sex crimes against our nation's most precious and most vulnerable. They're horrific crimes. Families have been shattered, tragedies have been faced, and Trump has stood up and said enough is enough. Well, as of July 13, 2025, of the 57,000 people detained by ICE currently, 71.5% of them have no criminal conviction whatsoever. That's ICE's own data. Fortune is reporting that of 204,000 people processed through ICE this year, just 7% of them were violent offenders, while 53% had non-violent convictions, usually either traffic or immigration-only offenses. Trump World says they're targeting the worst of the worst, but the data clearly shows otherwise. It's so obvious now that his ICE director just told CBS recently that they're going to arrest people regardless of their criminal record. Finally, the quiet part comes out loud, huh? Pair that with an internal target of 3,000 arrests per day and them being $1 billion over budget before the big beautiful bill was signed. It looks like they told a lie on the campaign trail, made promises that they couldn't keep, and are now trying to stat pad their way into some sort of kind of truth. Now pair that with how rich the private prison industry is getting from this policy, and it's not precision. It's not protection either. It's waste, it's fraud, it's abuse, it's corruption. So much for draining the swamp. The average cost to arrest, detain, and remove someone from America is about $17,000 per person. That's right. This information comes from DHS themselves. Now, adult detentions cost $165 per day per person. Family detention costs significantly more, which is probably why they separate these families. By contrast, ICE's alternatives to deportation program cost under $4 per day. Again, every piece of data I've used here is ICE's data, DHS's data. Roughly 90% of the people detained by ICE are held in private detention centers owned by GEO Group or CoreCivic. GEO just landed a 15-year contract in New York, New Jersey for $1 billion. That's $1 billion of taxpayer money, public money going to a private contractor. And this was a no-bid contract, by the way. So it could have cost between 30 to 60% less than $1 billion, but taxpayers are paying that anyway. Maybe ICE was so sure they wanted to go with GEO Group because GEO Group hired a top-ranking official at ICE in Daniel Bible, and then he became an executive at GEO Group. And this is right before the 2024 election too. That's called a revolving door. That has nothing to do with public safety. So much for draining the swamp. Seriously. AP, NBER, and Cato Institute all show no immigrant crime wave. Even further, there's a report by the NBER that shows that incarceration rates for immigrants have declined since the 1960s. They're actually 60% less likely to be incarcerated than a native-born American. Facts have no place in perception and feelings, right? Whatever happened to Laken Riley, we want to make sure it never happens again, correct? Right. So we created the Laken Riley Act, which mandates detention for people who are charged, not convicted, with a wide range of crimes, including low-level petty theft and shoplifting. And when I say shoplifting, I'm not talking about the big smash and grabs and like riots that you see on Fox News where they clear out the Louis Vuitton store. I'm talking about actual like teenage shoplifting. They want to get thieves who are stealing as low as $100. They want no due process and indefinite detainments for thefts under $100. This is widely disproportionate to the crime and has nothing to do with what Laken Riley went through. Now, legal groups are already saying that this will flood the system. It will inundate resources and make it more difficult to enforce immigration policy because of the sheer amount of frivolous trials and cases that are brought to them. There's no due process. This is in direct conflict with the Fifth Amendment, with all of our amendments. This is completely unconstitutional. I mean, what does a petty crime like shoplifting have to do with the heinous crime that went against Laken Riley, or of Kate Steinle, or of Molly Tibbetts? The only real pattern here, the only real consistency is that all of these cases, perpetrator was Mexican. But yes, I'm not here to say that violent immigrants don't exist. They absolutely do. What I'm saying is that's not the typical ICE detainee, and that's not the promise that was made to afford them this incredible budget. It's not what Trump campaigned on, it's not what he promised, and it's clear as day when you get into the details of the policy. Policy allows you to mostly scoop up people with no criminal convictions, with no criminal record, with no trial, with no court case. ICE now taps information from the IRS, the DMV, and Palantir to find their folks. That means they're hunting down people that fill out ITINs, that renew their driver's license in the 19 states that allow undocumented immigrants to drive, or have pending asylum cases and valid addresses. We're essentially punishing people who are following the rules for trying to play by the system. Meanwhile, I don't see $170 billion going to finding and hunting the Vance Bolters of the world. Even when the FBI has said repeatedly across years that white nationalism is a domestic terror threat in the United States. 2 out of those 3 names, those crimes happened in red states, which you would think is completely compliant with whatever immigration laws they would like to enact, right? But they love to blame sanctuary cities. They love to blame blue states for this problem. Well, let me tell you why sanctuary policy exists. Sanctuary policies exist because police chiefs found out it's much easier to solve a crime when immigrants have no fear of deportation. They actually report crimes and they share information and witness testimonies that help us find actual violent criminals. This quota machine does the exact opposite. They used scapegoat populism to get this office. And now they are just flat out being corrupt and siphoning money into their own pockets. Let's be real. The crimes Trump is citing are horrifying. But even Molly Tibbetts' father, Rob Tibbetts, saw past this politicization of a tragedy. He begged politicians, Republicans especially, to stop using his daughter's name to push what she would have believed was a profoundly racist narrative. In his Des Moines Register op-ed, he called it heartless and despicable what they were doing. And he actually went as far as to praise Iowa's Hispanic community, considering them his La Raza. He said they are Iowans with just much better food. When the victim's own family, when the victim's own father says you're exploiting this case to sell fear, you're exploiting this case to sell fear. Maybe it isn't about public safety after all. For anybody that's still watching this, that says illegal immigrants have committed a crime, they crossed the border illegally, well, improper entry into America the first time is a misdemeanor. Re-entry into the country is a felony, albeit a non-violent one. Neither of those things constitute that people should be getting a violent sexual predator image cast on top of them. Doesn't justify 3,000 arrests per day quota. It doesn't justify tent cities like Alligator Alcatraz or deporting people to a concentration camp like CCOT. And it absolutely doesn't justify billion-dollar private contracts of taxpayer money. We're detaining tens of thousands of people, most of them with no convictions whatsoever, to point to a handful of horrific cases and pretend that the system is protecting you. It isn't. It's enriching the elite and it's dissolving our Constitution. That's all the negativity I'm going to talk about when it comes to immigration and ICE. In the next video or videos, we're going to talk about solutions. We're going to talk about daily actions you can do to fight against this and to protect as many people as you possibly can. We're talking about 287G, Freedom of Information Act, the budget fights, DMV data shutoffs, and so much more. I know a lot of times this information can leave you feeling depressed and like there's nothing you can do and powerless, but there is, and there always is. But there always is. See you in the next video.